Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're here at the Humanists of Greater Portland meeting at Friendly House. And we are gathered together today as humanists, and a simple definition of humanism is a philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. Humanists strive to lead meaningful and ethical lives and use reason and empathy to guide their decisions and actions. We do this because this is the only life for which we are certain. As humanists, we affirm the dignity and worth of all people. We do this not only to acknowledge that all humans have accomplished, for all that humans have accomplished in the arts, science, and humanities, but also simply for the possibility for peace and well-being when people interact with respect for one another. Our reader this morning is Dave Pedworth, and come on in, Dave. You're going to be doing our reading this morning. You're a very popular reader, so this is going to be fun. Thank you.
Good morning. This coming Tuesday is World Book Day. Oh. So I've accumulated some tidbits from social media. The first one is, I will never cease to be amazed by books. Seriously, just think about it. Thousands of people read the same book, but in each one's mind, the characters look different and the setting changes, and we're all reading the same thing, but it's so unique to all of us. That's insanely cool. Posted by Finding Home in a Book. Then I signed for a package last week. The delivery driver said, "DiCamillo? Wait, did you write Because of Winn-Dixie?" I did. "Oh, wow," he said. "My third grade teacher read that book to us. I'll never forget it." And then he smiled at me, this radiant, beautiful smile, and I suddenly saw him as an 8-year-old kid sitting in class, listening to a story. That man's third grade teacher is out there somewhere, and I wanted her to know this. He remembers her reading to him. And then this, when our genes could not store, oh, that was by Kate DiCamillo. When our genes could not store all our information necessary for survival, we slowly invented them. But then the time came, perhaps 10,000 years ago, when we needed to know more than could be conveniently contained in our brains. So we learned to stockpile enormous quantities of information outside of our bodies. We are the only species on the planet, so far as we know, to have invented a communal memory stored neither in our genes or in our brains. The warehouse of that memory is called a library. A book is made from a tree. One glance at it and you hear the voice of another person, perhaps someone dead for thousands of years. Across the millennia, the author is speaking clearly and silently inside your head, directly to you. Writing is perhaps the greatest of human inventions, binding together people, citizens of distant epochs who never knew each other. Books break the shackles of time, proof that humans can work magic. Carl Sagan. And last but not least, the man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read. Mark Twain. Have a good day.
Oh, Dave, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I now would like to introduce Suzanne Thornton, who will be introducing our 3 HGP members who are going to be sharing their personal story. Come on in, Suzanne.
Neil Baldwin is in Ethiopia as a young man in the 60s, and they're taking a road trip up into the mountains. Now, it's Ethiopia, so it's not hot, cold mountains, but nevertheless, the truck breaks down. And what do these people do? They're the 3 volunteers from the program. And so they spend the night in the truck. And then he figures out what's wrong with it, and it's a belt in the truck. And so I'm not going to tell you the ending, because you can find out by dialing him, Neil Baldwin, and call him up and ask him. That would be a connection. Or you could watch the video and it tells what he did to solve that problem. Or you can ask me at the end of the program. Okay. Kathy Moyd, our second speaker. And Kathy has since died. I don't think she knows she knew she was sick, but she is gone. And Kathy had so much she wanted to talk about. She worked in the space program. And then she did this other thing, and that's what she ended up speaking about. And she volunteered. She was a hardcore Democrat. She lived in California, and she volunteered to be a representative, to run for a representative. And it was called a sacrifice candidate. She was the sacrifice candidate, and she knew she wouldn't win, but they had to have somebody. And so what does she do? She doesn't like public speaking, but she thinks it's a good idea to go at it. And so she has this big arena, and people from DC come. One of the Kennedys came, and there are pictures with her, and it was a great experience for her. So that's what she told about. Then I was a third speaker, and I told about leaving a religious order from 1959 to 1974. And I wanted this group to know about this because, there's just a lot of positioning there. So I told the story of how I started to gradually unthread the big doctrines, and how I finally came to realize that, I couldn't really be in the order. I wasn't really even a believer. Mm-hmm. So then that was my story. So today we have 3 people, and these are Margie Adams. What do you know about Margie? Since we've had COVID, everybody has to kind of be out hiding somewhere. Okay, Margie ran the newsletter editing for years. Thank you, Margie. She's also hosts a book club, I know. And Jim and Margie host dinners, they're potlucks for many years. So that's Margie. Jules Elias. Jules has this rich, wonderful voice, and I was so intrigued with his accent, and I've been able to get to know Jules. And he has this really rich musical background. You're going to know this. He's been a presenter here, and his website is veritylovers.com. That's his website. So it just tells you a little bit about Jules and about his music. And David Gray used to be our president. So he put in his time. David has been a presenter, and I know that he asked really good questions for the other speakers. So I've noticed that. So those are our presenters today, and I think Margie gets to be first.
Well, I brought some notes because I don't want to forget what I'm talking about. Could happen, Well, Suzanne invited me to talk to you. I'll chase it. So I decided to talk to you about the years that I devoted my life to pottery and the clay world. My interest in clay started back in the 1970s when I took a pottery class at Portland Community College, the Sylvania campus. And before long, I had a potter's wheel at home. Then in 1985, Jim and I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and I enrolled in Memphis College of Art and really started getting serious about clay. For the first time, I was not working and my kids were grown, so I had the time. And soon I joined the Memphis Potters Guild, and through their yearly sale, I started selling pots. Soon after that, I started selling through craft fairs and galleries. And I need to add here that without Jim's help, I couldn't have done any of that because the travel and loading and setting up a booth for craft fairs is really hard work. Everything about clay is heavy. Then in 1990, Jim and I moved back to Portland, and I joined the Oregon Potters Association. And the Potters Association has a show and sale every year called Showcase. It's the largest all clay show in the country, has over 200 artists showing. And after about 3 years in Showcase, I volunteered to chair the show. Well, I had no experience doing anything like that, but I felt confident that I could do it. So I have a vivid memory of my first Showcase membership meeting when I had to stand up and take the microphone and talk in front of about 100 people and give a presentation for the coming show. I had my notes in order, but boy, my knees were shaking. A lot of the artists in the show are professionals, and that show is important to them. They make a lot of money there. And as time went on, it did get easier, and I really relied a lot on the committees. They are very important, and they do a lot of work. There were a lot of committees. To name just a few, there were publicity, children's clay area work shifts, floor plan, financial. I don't know, I can't think of any others right now, but there were a lot of committees. I also worked with the convention center to lock in our dates. Reservations have to be made at least 3 years in advance. Of course, there's insurance to deal with. The fire marshal has so many reservations, last-minute inspections. Also, we had to have a nurse on duty. I did this for a total of 7 years, and after about the third or fourth year, 12 of us craft artists from several different fields got together and started a new venue, and we named it Art in the Pearl. You might have heard of it. It's held Labor Day weekend in the North Park blocks. It's still going on, and now it's been about maybe 25 years. It was more complicated at first due to needing permits from the city, and we had problems with some of the residents of the Pearl District that live in the condos and the apartments that didn't really like having a festival going on in their front yard. Some of them didn't like having their access to their parking garages and so on blocked. Even though it was only for 3 days at a time, they were kind of fussy about that, but we worked it all out. And now Art in the Pearl is considered one of the premier craft events in the country. I used my experience with Showcase to chair Art in the Pearl for 10 years. And once again, being chair of that show was possible only because of the committees and Jim's help always with all the heavy work. Couldn't have done it without him, that's for sure. I'm sorry to say I didn't save any of the pictures from those years, but I did bring a few of the pots I made, both hand-built and wheel thrown. I can tell you about a few of these. Well, I can just pick them up and hold them up here. This one is the oldest. This one is from the 1970s. It's wheel thrown and altered, was originally thrown in a cylinder and then altered, squished, thrown round in a cylinder and then squished to an oval. And I used a piece of wood, probably a stick, to make, texture. And it fired to, it's stoneware, fired to high temperature in a gas kiln. I don't remember the exact temperature of reduction fire, but somewhere around 2000 degrees. This is my turtle. I made this the most recently. I got into making garden art because I'm very much of a gardener. And this one is fired in a electric kiln. It's called oxidation because it's fired with lots of oxygen. And it's cone 6, it's called. That's a medium range fire, which is more, again, I don't remember the exact temperature, more like probably, I will make a wild guess and say probably about 1300 degrees. Hand built. I had a slab roller where I rolled out slabs that are about maybe, I don't know, maybe 1/4 of an inch thick. And then I cut 2-inch wide strips of clay and let them set up to what's called leather hard. So it's like a piece of leather, obviously. And then I constructed this out of those leather hard strips. Then this little bird, I just kind of pinched it out of a gob of, like a handful of clay, and just kind of squeezed out this bird. Wheel thrown. This is from the, like, somewhere around 2000, I would say. This is decorated with colored slip, and slip is just like a sloppy clay, has about the consistency of pudding, that is colored with commercial stains and then painted on and glazed with a clear glaze and fired to low fire, which is like about cone 2, maybe 1000 degrees. Also wheel thrown. And this one is glazed with a white glaze and then painted with commercial stains over the white glaze. This is called Maiolica. And this dates from, maybe 2005, something like that. So that's it.
I'm just curious why you needed a nurse at the show there. Is it dangerous? Are they people throwing pots at each other or something?
It's just a requirement of the Coliseum. Anytime there are, like a large crowds of people, in case somebody has a heart attack or a,
You weren't having fun. You weren't actually
no.
you weren't eating.
we were not a dangerous crowd, but it's
Okay.
a requirement of the not the Coliseum. convention center.
Margie, there's a question from the Zoom audience. What is the effect of higher or lower firing heat?
Oh, it's the higher temperature, they are more like weather resistant if they're going to be outside, and more they will hold water better. This one I would not put in the microwave. For one thing, this red clay, I don't ever put this red clay in the microwave. It has too much iron in it, and it's a low fire. But the ones that are high fired stoneware, I would put those in the microwave. Yeah, the high fired, like coffee cups and so on, high fired coffee cups, they can go in the microwave. But these low fired red clay earthenware, they are not nearly as durable. And I would never put these low fire in the microwave. They're not as durable.
Okay. Leslie has a question. Go ahead, Leslie.
Did you ever consider going out and finding your own clay?
Yeah, when I lived in Tennessee, I mean, Tennessee is definitely clay. Yeah, there's lots of clay in Tennessee. And sometimes when I belonged to the Oregon Potters Association, we were a very social bunch. We would get together on camping trips, and we would go out and do like primitive fires and things, and we would dig pits and pinch up pots like that little bird. We would and we would pinch like little pinched vessels and things, and then fire them in pits. And we would sometimes do things like dig our own clay and then fire it in pits and things like that. Yes. But we did that mostly here in the Portland area. We would like go camping down toward the beach and dig a pit and do pit fires and things. But Tennessee is the place where there is more clay. However, I didn't do as many social things in Tennessee as I did here in Portland.
Dave Gray has a question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you got the colors on all those things. I presume after
Yeah.
they had been heated and cooled down to room temperature, or was any of the painting done before they were?
Oh yeah.
heated?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's all done. The colors are all done before the fire. They're all fired in there. Yes, definitely. These are commercial stains. You buy these and it's all painted. You know, I really am so sorry that I got rid of the pictures, but I'm kind of a get rid of everything I don't need person. I'm the opposite of a hoarder. I am a get rid of it person. And I have been getting rid of pictures like crazy. And it was only about 1 month before Suzanne asked me to do this that I got rid of all my old pottery pictures.
Oh.
And there's not one old pottery picture left. But I have many pictures of me sitting in my studio painting this stuff, and they are all gone. But I sat for many hours and hours. I spent more time painting this stuff than I did actually making the pots. So I'm probably taking up more of my time than is allotted
doing
to
fine.
me. So anyway, that's my story.
Oh, thank you, Margie. All right, we have our next speaker coming up. Who's our second speaker? Jules, and Jules will be coming to us through Zoom. So come on in, Jules. So glad that you're here, and thank you for doing this today.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And from a high level, in 2 weeks, I'll be 90 years old. And as I begin to prepare a program for my 90th birthday celebration, I'm going to give a recital. Some of you have heard me play the clarinet. I wanted to play today, but somehow the mechanics and Dave worked very hard to make it happen. But we have old iPads, so couldn't do it. The clarinet is really half the story today. The recital will be at the old church. I remember many years ago, David and Dave Gray and some other individuals showed up at one of my recitals. So yeah, that's where I will focus my energies for the next 2 weeks. But I'm going to give you two stories, my clarinet story and my academia life story. And from a high level, I'm a Korean War vet, had the GI Bill. I'm a cancer survivor of a type of cancer that's incurable, but somehow I'm out 5 years now this month. So that's another celebration. And I managed to marry a woman who has been, as Margie said about her husband, Jim, a major force in my life and still is. So I will begin my story when I was 13 years old. And I was looking forward to my confirmation and entering so-called manhood in the Hebrew tradition. I was brought up in a very Orthodox home, Sephardic Jews, living in Brooklyn, and the synagogue was right behind our house. I heard everything that they said and sang, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience in my past life. But it was Christmas, and myself and my dad and I were on 42nd Street in Manhattan, looking in the Wurlitzer window. So anybody who's had that experience in New York, Wurlitzer is a major, major provider of organs, pianos, and musical instruments. And that window had colorful decorations on all the instruments. The clarinet always had a special place in my dreams. I told my dad it was beckoning to me. I made many promises, most of which I kept, and my parents agreed to purchase it despite their economic restrictions. They paid it off in 3 years, and with that purchase came 10 weeks of free lessons, which was another way to get the clientele enmeshed in the musical world. My first teacher was an Italian immigrant who was subbing in the mid-opera. And we started in a very basic book. Anybody who knows the books that I use, the Rubang series, and I learned to play the song, Believe Me of All Those Endearing Young Charms, at the back of the book. After the performance, this was at the end of 10 weeks, we gave a recital, all the students. After the performance, one of the mothers of one of the boys who performed on that same program asked me what kind of reed I was using. It's the reed. She asked me, why did I sound different from her son? And she asked me, what kind of a reed am I using? And I said, the ordinary cane reed. And she said, I don't understand it. Anyway, I couldn't give her a straight answer. And then in retrospect, I realized it was the value of long tones. And since I can't play my clarinet, I can't really play a long tone for you. But it's holding one note for 20, 30, 40 beats. You learn how to breathe from your diaphragm, and you play the note in pianissimo, very soft, mezzo, medium, and go to double forte and double. So you learn the control of sound. As a vocalist would have to do that. Well, okay, so I used to practice 30 minutes a day, and I would do long tones, and then I would, when I got to high school, I practiced 4 hours a day. Now you'd wonder, how did I find 4 hours a day? Didn't I have schoolwork to do? Well, I did. But I sort of put it on the side because I didn't have any perspective in terms of going on to advanced education. We were immigrants, the children of immigrants. And college was for very, in their mind, very smart, very rich people. The ordinary person, which we considered ourselves, didn't go to college. So I played 4 hours a day. And the first hour was on the long tones that I just described to you. And the second hour, I was going to play them for you, was on scales. And the third hour was on all the etudes that I had to learn. And the fourth hour was I treat myself to whatever I thought I could play. And I had some great teachers, and one of them was Charlie Russo, who doesn't mean anything, but he went to Manhattan School of Music, which was second to Juilliard. And we'd go there on a Saturday, and we'd clear the Rice Krispies off the kitchen table and give me a lesson. Okay. I finally got to the point where I was graduating high school, and they were offering scholarships. And the people coming around auditioning us were from the Firestone Theater of the Year. If those of you who go back as far as I do, on black and white TV, it was a major symphony orchestra that gave us exposure, those of us who didn't go to concerts, to what the symphonic orchestra sounds like. And the person who came was the first oboist of that orchestra, and he asked me to play the standard stuff and I played it without any problems. And then he looked, and what else do you have? I had some literature from the French, and they're still to this day the premier clarinet people. And I played some really difficult stuff, which I had spent a lot of time on for a lot of years. And he said, you're good enough to say that I would qualify for full scholarships at either the University of Miami in Florida or the University of Eastern Kentucky. I didn't even know then that was a state, Eastern Kentucky. Okay, so I get home and I tell my immigrant mother, who came here from Greece as a young girl, 4th grade education. And she asked, okay, isn't that nice? I'm proud of you, but who would take care of me and how would I get there? Because in our ghetto existence, no one we knew had a car, much less got on airplanes. She then added my being so far from home would make her unhappy, who would feed me, who would care for me, all of that. Needless to say, I did not take the office. Instead, I went to Brooklyn College and I majored in music. Well, I was a good clarinetist, but I wasn't a finished musician by any measure. And they were giving courses in dictation where they play notes on a piano. You're supposed to name that note just by hearing that sound and all that kind of stuff. But it was not what I could do. So I was not doing well in trigonometry as well. And I began to get very discouraged. And I lost my confidence and I went to the Army. I quit, joined the US Army during the Korean War, which upset everybody because I had a deferment because I was a college student. But if I kept on, I would have been asked to leave. Anyway, to allay my mother's fears, I packed my clarinet in my duffel bag. Here's one time where a white lie really, really is worth it. I told her I was in the band and not to worry. And of course I wasn't. I was a trained rifleman. I had 16 weeks of basic training. I had an M1 that I could sleep with and put together in my blindfolded. That's how much we got to know our weapon. And I was trained to go to the Korea and get to the front lines and shoot. Well, for whatever reason, we were shipped to Germany instead of Korea. And we were going to live in the Black Forest and part of the line against Russia, the Cold War system. On the ship going across, I'm on the ship and I noticed a bunch of Greek young men who were also, Army guys. And I knew that they were so endowed with the idea of getting citizenship in this country. And if they went into the Army and got an honorable discharge, they qualified within 90 days, assuming they passed the test. So they were there. Now, in my earlier comments about my father and mother getting me the clarinet, I promised them I'd learn to play Greek music, which I did, so they could dance. And on Sunday afternoons, they had a Greek station on. They had black olives and big kashkaval, big, thick, dry, salty cheese. And the neighbors would come in and they'd dance. And I learned that music. So I told these Greek guys, I know how to play this. Could you dance? Oh, yes. Much to my surprise, some other guy brought a trumpet, another guy brought a flute. There was a bass drum, and we created a USO type show. I couldn't believe how it worked, but there were 1,300 of us on that ship, so I had to do 2 shows. The upper part of the ship was the officers, their wives, their dogs, their furniture, their kids. They were being gyroscoped to Germany for 8 or 10 years. After the second show, we hear a tan hut, and there's an orderly there, and he says, please, quiet, and we have somebody here who wants to talk to you. Somebody steps up. I got blinded by the brass on his shoulders, a 4-star general. And he says, "Men, I can't believe, I'm so surprised," something to that effect. "If there's anything I could do for you, you let me know." I said, "Sir, if you can get us in a band, that would be great." He said, "I'll see what I can do." He leaves. I asked the orderly, "Who is that guy?" That guy was General Van Nostrand, Supreme Allied Commander of all the troops in Europe. I said, "Man, if anybody could do it, he could." Well, we land in Bremerhaven. We get shipped down to Würzburg in Bavaria. And the band that was playing us in, the warrant officer comes over. I said, "I heard there was a bunch of musicians here. Anybody want to try out?" Well, 11 of the 12 of us tried out and got into the band, and we were living the high life. We were put in a building for special troops, prize fighters, basketball players, whatever. We had our own 2 guys to a room, stall, beautiful tile showers, wood floors, a rehearsal hall with a pool table. The good life. Played all over Europe. Got to play in Arnhem for the 10-year celebration of the liberation of Holland. Arnhem is a beautiful place to go. It's all wall-to-wall tulips. And we played and marched through the streets, and Queen Wilhelmina was drawn through the streets on a big carriage with 6 white horses. And we were 19-year-old kids. Most of us were young. When the parade was over, the crowd had a deja vu. They experienced the end of that Second World War, and they grabbed us, took us into the bars and restaurants, bought us drinks, bought us food, couldn't thank us enough. And of course, we had nothing to do with it. And we absorbed it, but we didn't really have the way to respond in time. Okay, so when I got out of the Army, I knew I could do something right, and I got back to school, and that suddenly became easy. And my academic life kicked in. I had the GI Bill. I married a gal who's sitting right next to me here. We're married 67 years. And she was an English major and became an English teacher. And I got back to Brooklyn College, and I loved everything that I was exposed to, particularly biology, which was a required course. I learned a lot about botany. I fell in love with plants. And I graduated with a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. And I was offered a job in upstate New York. And it was like 50 miles from the border of Canada, where in those days, when it snowed, you were snowed in for 4 to 6 months. Renee said, "Nothing doing?" Well, we didn't take it. I learned other courses that qualified me for pre-med. I didn't want to go pre-med. I had every reason to believe that it wasn't what I wanted to do. Well, turns out that I ended up in med. And the med story got even more complicated as I learned to behave in a way that would allow me to progress in a career, and I worked at Brookhaven Labs at the Federal Laboratory, and I learned a lot of new technology, and I learned from the best. Long story short, I got so good at what I did that I ended up giving workshops all over the country. And I published this book. This is my first book. Doesn't mean a thing to you, but the key word in here is immunohistochemistry. That's using antibodies to locate particular protein from tumors that didn't define themselves, and therefore you could treat them accordingly. And I did this before I got my doctorate. In fact, the guy who invented the technique said I knew I could explain it better than he could. Took me all over the country as he gave lectures on this. And then I would give lectures to neuropathologists, pathologists who only dealt with the brain, because that was his specialty. Well, anyway, long story short, I was told by one of my so-called bosses at Stony Brook University, where I eventually went, that, professor in Europe counts for something, but professor in this country doesn't really count for much. You're in an MD environment, you better get an advanced degree. I said, I'm not going to go to med school now. So I went ahead and got my doctorate. So I had the doctorate done before I had this book done before I even got my doctorate, which is what other people do after they get their doctorate. Again, long story short, 20 years later, after I published all over the world, I ended up writing this book, which went into a second edition, and by a publishing company called American Society of Clinical Pathologists, a very esteemed book. And in fact, Amazon still sells this book for something like $150. My royalties after 10 years stopped, but it was a charmer, and it was over I say about 3,000 references in the book. I lived in the library. Fortunately, there was a medical library that was so good at the university that my lunch hours and after hours I would spend in the library, and I'd make Xerox pages. Forgive me for tearing down that many trees, but I took home a lot of articles that I Xerox so I can read them at home. And finally, I met a guy who was in his 4th edition. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going back to the library." He said, "If you keep going to the library, you'll never finish. There's never going to be not new information that you don't want to miss, but you have to stop at some point." And I stopped. And his wife, we didn't have computers then. She typed Renee did it, the 2nd edition. But anyway, long story short, I had a great time.
Yes.
But it all started with Mozart and Brahms. So I had 2 lives, my clarinet life, my academic life. Now I'm going to ask Renee to talk right now by reciting a poem that she composed. She's a poetess, has a whole book of poems, won't let me publish them, but they're unbelievable poems. And she will sort of summarize where we are in our lives. Thanks for listening to me.
This is only because Jules is going to be 90. I don't share my poems with anybody outside the family. But this poem was written in honor of his 90th birthday, and it's called The Objective Correlative of Our Lives. Sometimes we talk about our life together. We try to understand what it is and was that keeps our feelings so intense through the inevitable roller coaster of the years. Perhaps the answer, if there is one, lies in who we are, our basic selves, our trills. What is it that is and has been a concrete symbol of our life together? The objective correlative that runs through our time and space like an operatic theme by Puccini. When I close my eyes and think about my husband, my friend, my companion, there is always the clarinet. When I first saw him so many years ago as a member of our high school band, as the young soldier who used the age-old clarinetist refrain, "I need new reeds to come home each weekend," as the young father who gave lessons so we could pay our pediatrician, go out to lunch, take a vacation, as the amateur musician playing with others for the sheer joy of the sound, as the much admired player at the old church. I hear as he plays each day in his blue music room, running through those pieces that allow his aging fingers, his aging lips to make the beautiful sound that has always been Jules. I know that all is well in our world as he lovingly wipes his beloved licorice stick and puts it away for the night. I know it will be there tomorrow, and there will be music for another day of our life together.
Am I lucky? Okay, that's my story. Thank you.
2 minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question? It looks like Suzanne does. Here we go.
Yes. Hi, Jules.
Hi, Suzanne.
You
Thanks
missed-
for inviting me.
Yes, I'm glad you could make it. You said the old church. What date is that?
May 15th. It's noon, 12 o'clock. And it's free, of course. And it's on Clay and 11th. May 15th. It's a beautiful environment. If
Yeah.
you've never been there, it's worth the trip just to get inside. It's no longer a functioning church. It's a concert hall, lecture hall. It's gorgeous with stained windows. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you. I wanted others to know this.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right. I don't think, Jules, you did such a fine job of that. What a fascinating life that you led. I mean, to join the army during the Korean War, I bet your family was just frantic.
Devastated. They were devastated. Yeah.
Yeah, but yet it all worked out so wonderfully. So,
I
I'm
saw
glad.
Hank Robb. Hank Robb had a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hank Robb. When did you stop practicing the religion of your parents? That was a question.
That's a very good question.
Married in
I came
Memphis.
here and I found the Sephardic Church on Barbara Boulevard, and I went there for many years. And I loved it. Was a men's club, as I look back. Orthodox, the women is either in the back or on somewhere out of sight. And okay, so the quick answer is probably we're here 25 years, probably year 10. Or Renee was very patient with me. She didn't participate. Renee was completely divorced from any formal religion. And okay, so I would say about 10 or 12 years ago, I left it. And the more I left it, the more I realized what I really felt and it wasn't a deity and an organized religion.
Thank you. Jules, do you know if your recording at the old church will be recorded?
Well,
your
if you go to
presentation will be recorded?
YouTube, the answer is if you go to YouTube, I gave her a recital, a solo recital about a year ago. So that's on YouTube, Jules Elias, at their seminar website. It's
Okay.
the TOC, the old church. But
Okay.
this particular recital will be recorded
Chris Cooper.
and will be probably put on YouTube. Yeah.
And
probably.
YouTube. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And but in person, it'll be May 15th at
May
noon.
15th at noon, Old Church on Clay and 11th.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
thank you
so
for
much.
making that information available. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for this wonderful story. That was really lovely. Much appreciated. All right. Our final speaker. I mean, guys, this is pretty amazing. These people, they're our members. Dave Gray will be our final speaker today. Dave, thanks for doing this. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you are willing to share with us today.
Jules, that was very impressive. I don't think I'm going to measure up to your level. But we do have a couple of things in common that I didn't realize. I played clarinet too, but at a very low level. And I'm also at least officially Jewish, although I've never practiced the religion at all. Well, look, let me start the official talk. I'm going to talk a little minute about some episodes of my earlier life and then get to what I'm particularly focused and interested in now. Okay, I was born in May of 1937 in Philadelphia. And just a few words about my parents. My mother's parents were Jews who immigrated from the Ukraine to Philadelphia in about 1900. was born in 1905. And my father's last name Gray, of course, and I don't really know anything about his family life. But I want to say a little bit about special gifts I got from my parents. My mother had been a school teacher, and she was particularly focused on being exactly right about English grammar. And I still have that characteristic slightly. And she emphasized, be truthful, always be honest. And I claim that I usually am. My father had several interests. He was very interested in sports. He took me out into the back alley and taught me how to throw and catch a football. And the really, really special gift he gave me was he somehow got interested in classical music. And I wish I had asked him to explain it back in those days when I was a young kid, but you know, you're trying to figure out your own life and you don't really ask your parents a lot of intelligent questions. He was not a highly educated guy, but somehow he got interested in classical music. I'm kind of guessing that he just walked past the concert hall, which was called the Academy of Music. And the Philadelphia Orchestra was one of the most renowned orchestras in the world. Anyway, he when LP records started to come out in 1949 or 50 or so, he brought some home, mostly recordings of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And he brought a great big loudspeaker, just one, because that was before recording in stereo. And that involvement in classical music has stuck with me all my life. So as I said, I was born in 1937, which means this coming May, I'll be 87. That's too damn old. But science has not figured out how to reverse aging yet, unfortunately. And I think a few people here will kind of identify with my tendency to get frustrated about aging. Nothing works the way it used to. Damn it. Oh, well. I'll get on to high school. Started out at a high school called Germantown High, which was in the neighborhood called Germantown in Philadelphia. Went there a couple of years, and then we moved. And my parents urged me to transfer to Central High School. Central was an all-boys high school. And it wasn't associated with the school district. You could go there from anywhere in Philadelphia if you passed some kind of entrance test, which somehow I did pass. So I ended up going to Central for 2 years, and it was the guys there were mostly nerdy Jewish guys. Jules, you probably you're a nerdy Jewish guy, and some of them were extremely smart. And what was really special about that experience was the heroes at Central were those academic, exceptionally guys, rather than the sports athletes. So, and I also, Jules, we have this in common. I played clarinet, but only for a couple of years. And I was in the school orchestra, which made an impression on me. I think my father got me into that too. I think he said, or thought, clarinet is a great instrument because you can play jazz like Benny Goodman did, or you can play classical. There's some of the classical composers composed for clarinet. Okay, then college. What about college? Well, my older brother, Steve, had already started at the University of Pennsylvania, Penn, one of the so-called Ivy League schools. And Steve, I'll just say a couple of words about him. So a few of you may recall he was here about 5 years ago to give a talk about a book called Christianity in Ruins. Obviously, he was a devout atheist, and he is very academic, and he did a lot of research and analyzed all the inconsistencies in the Bible and found that there was research which cast doubt that the character of Jesus ever really existed, and so forth and so forth. And he's he's working on what he's calling the second edition of that book now. It's almost finished. So I ended up going to Penn also, and I went there for 3 years, but I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I wasn't at a lot of natural science, animals, especially. I used to go to the zoo by myself in Philadelphia, and I was fascinated by the big cats, tigers, lions, cheetahs, leopards, and so forth, and by reptiles. I was fascinated by snakes. And I also was kind of interested in geology, and I thought maybe I'll be a geology major. But after 3 years, I decided I want to stop college, at least for a while. And I succumbed to my wandering urge, which I think I inherited from my father. And I hitchhiked across the country from Philadelphia to California. One time, came back, and then some months later, I don't remember the exact dates, did it a second time. And I hitchhiked down into Mexico, and don't remember a lot of the details because memory is failing a bit. But I did hitchhike back from Mexico City to Philadelphia and got into my parents' house. My mother was napping upstairs. I went upstairs and I said, "Hey, Mom." And she said, "David, I thought you were dead." Back in the days when it was, you didn't have mobile phones, so you couldn't communicate with people that easily. So after 2 years out of college, I did have a job for a while. I thought, I guess I should go back to college. So I on my hitchhiking, I went through Tucson, Arizona, and I thought, oh, that's a great town. And if I want to major in geology in Arizona, yeah. So I asked my parents if I could transfer to University of Arizona, and I don't quite know why they were so tolerant of that. I really should have had another year at Penn and graduated there. So anyway, I did go to the University of Arizona with the intention of majoring in geology, but for some reason, I can't recall what the reason was, or if there was any kind of logical reason. I switched to civil engineering, which turned out to be a bit of a struggle because there were courses in engineering that you have to take in engineering that I didn't have at Penn. Calculus, oh well, that wasn't easy. And finally, after 3 years, in other words, a total of 6 years in college, I did get a master's degree in civil engineering. And one more sentence about my brother's presentation. I introduced him and I said, Steve was third in his class in electrical engineering at Penn. And I was third in my class in civil engineering at the University of Arizona, third from the bottom, which was pretty accurate. So then after college, I thought I had to get a job, obviously. So I ended up with the General Electric Corporation in Bethesda, Maryland, in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. They had computers. They were in the computer business then, although they got out of it later. And some of you may know the computer back there, and talking about 1964 or 65, they were like big closet cabinets, and the data was on tape, in a big roll of tape. So I did that work, and I don't remember the details. It wasn't highly technical. I don't recall a lot of the stuff I did. But anyway, after 3 years or so, I started to get bored, and it was 1967, and the war in Vietnam had just started. And I decided I want to go to Vietnam and get involved in that. That's the wandering urge, the desire for adventure. So without really analyzing the geopolitical aspect, should we really be involved there or not? So I ended up with a civilian job with the U.S. AID, Agency for International Development, and had several months of training in a lot of it in the Vietnamese language, which I found fascinating. Vietnamese is unique among all the Asian languages is that officially it uses a modified Western alphabet, which was created several hundred years ago, and about 100 years ago was made the official written version of Vietnamese, which of course makes it much easier for someone like me to learn to read it. Vietnamese for me, it's fascinating. It's a tonal language. And the example I always give is ma. Same spelling, M-A, with different little marks for the tone, and they are entirely different words. And I also realize the grammar is so simple. They don't conjugate verbs. Now I go, next year I go, last year I go, which made me wonder, why is our grammar so damn complicated? Not to mention the extremely annoying, for me, inconsistent spelling in the English language. Well, I shouldn't go on and on about that. So I ended up in Vietnam for 2 tours of a year and a half each. So I was there for 3 years. And I found it a very interesting experience. I wasn't directly involved in the military stuff, but I did see a couple of times people who had been killed by military actions, bodies lying around. And I went on one excursion with some military guys. We took a boat down from Hue, which was the town up in what was called Region 2, kind of almost up to North Vietnam, and got off it in the middle of the night because we wanted to stop the harvesting by the Viet Cong, the VC they were called, of the crops that were grown there, which they snuck down during the night and harvested food. So the military guys in front of me encountered a few VC who were harvesting and shot them. And one or two were women, though it's rather shocking to see people who had just been shot and killed. So anyway, I was an advisor to what was called in Vietnamese the Chu Hoi program, which is hard to translate literally, but it meant come back to the government side, addressing the VC, and you'll be forgiven and you can live a normal life again. And it was quite interesting. Did that program, well, obviously it didn't win the war. We did convince maybe a few thousand of the VC to come back, but the big shots, the leaders of the VC didn't change their minds. And as you all know that the communists did eventually take over all of Vietnam. I did have one very, very special experience there. I found a lovely Vietnamese girl. We kind of fell in love in 1970 and got married there. And we had a child born in early 1971, Laura. And then it was time for my tour in Vietnam to end. So we went back to the US. We stopped in Hong Kong for a brief visit on the way, which was a great place to shop. It was a British colony then, and you could buy stuff at great bargains. And we ended up, I went to, I don't know where to go. I don't have a job yet. So we ended up, we went to Tucson where I went to college. And then shortly before then, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency had been created during the Nixon administration in, I think, 1969. And every state had to have an environmental agency also. And somehow, I don't remember how I found that the state of Illinois had a job opening that I could apply for, and I did. So my wife and I and our little girl, our baby girl, Laura, ended up in Springfield, Illinois. And I rather enjoyed being involved in the environmental movement. I became a lifetime member of the Sierra Club and joined several other environmental organizations. And then my parents had just retired, moved to Florida in 1976. So I thought, I want to go live closer to them. So I found a job with one of the US EPA's region offices in Atlanta, Georgia. Got that job. So we moved to Atlanta, and Atlanta was an interesting city. For me, a dyed-in-the-wool Yankee, the sort of southern aspect of it felt a little weird. So everything the job was great, and the kid, I forgot to mention this. Back in Springfield, we had 2 more kids. So there are 3 great kids. And, well, I was going to show you a couple of photos, but I guess that's not going to happen. Anyway, they're and still we have a very close bond. And there's one big problem going on in Atlanta. Marriage was not doing well. I decided that Michelle and I really didn't have that much in common to make us good partners for the rest of our life. And I thought, maybe I want to get divorced. So I found a lawyer, and I asked this, for me, vital question. Any chance that I can get custody of our 3 kids? And she had been a previous social worker, and she said, I think you can. So because I just loved the kid so much, I couldn't tolerate the idea of her getting custody of mine, not seeing them every day. So the divorce did happen, and I think it was early in 1984, and I had custody of the kids, and Michelle was angry at me for starting the divorce, which is understandable, of course. And I met my second wife, Joan, in the December of 1984. And we started a relationship and ended up getting married in April of 1986. And we just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary a couple of weeks ago. And and that's been very interesting. And Joan has a son from her first marriage, Jeff. So Jeff and my 3 kids became our kids. And I remember back in the beginning, I would occasionally refer to my kids as my kids. And Joan said, no, they're our kids. And she has been wonderfully loving and generous and caring about all of the kids. And we now have 7 grandchildren. Jeff and his wife, Kate, they've become doctors, and they are the only ones of our kids who live in the Portland area. And they have 2 kids. And the 3 gray kids, there are 2 of them are in California, one in the Bay Area. Martinez is the name of that town is east of Oakland, and one of them in Culver City in the LA area. And the third one, our youngest, Sarah, actually Jeff and Sarah are about the same age, is in Spain. She married a guy from Spain, and they ended up living in Mallorca. Few of you may have heard about that. It's an island in the Mediterranean that is part of Spain. Very, very popular touristy place that people from Northern Europe come down there and vacation there. And we hope to visit them someday. So Joan had been in Atlanta for a couple of years earlier than I was, but when I was close to retiring, I thought, I don't want to live in Atlanta the rest of my life. And so we kind of looked around, where should we move to? We actually went up to Maine. I remember Now that we didn't move to Maine, and now I'm probably glad because I don't think I could take that very cold winters anymore. So Joan had traveled a lot in her work. And so one of our kids, Sarah, the one who's now in Spain, she found out about a program which enabled you to go to a public university in some other state and pay that in-state tuition for a year. So she applied to 3 or 4 different colleges or state universities, one of which was the University of Oregon. And she ended up there for a year. And I suspect she wanted to get as far away from her parents as she could. And I visited her there in Eugene once, and we took a hike up the Cascade Mountains. And I had a very positive impression of Oregon. And so in 2004, Joan and I moved to the Portland area, not the city of Portland, down in Clackamas County, in a neighborhood called Oak Grove, because the exact neighborhood where we lived was Oak Lodge, and a little bit south of there was Jennings Grove. So, and I had one interesting experience. I became one of the directors on the board of directors of the local water district. That was an interesting experience. And I got a job with a private company that had a contract with EPA for a few years, and was still working for, I think, maybe a year after moving to the Clackamas County neighborhood. And I ended up retiring at age 69. Joan kept working for a few more years. And this house in the Oak Grove neighborhood was on the Willamette River. And it was big property, almost an acre. And there was this big expanse of land between the house and the river. And I found it a challenging and enjoyable experience to do with landscaping and gardening. So I did some pretty ambitious landscaping. A couple of people here, I think, have been at the house back in that day. I also had the idea of building a stage because there was a big rock face which curved, and the acoustics would be perfect in front of that to have music played. So we ended up having a stage, sort of a stage built. And we did have some music events and a big event for my 80th birthday, which was a wonderful experience. A couple of years before that, I had started taking singing lessons because I was very interested in classical music. So I started taking singing lessons. My teacher was an opera singer. He and his wife sang, and Joyce and Kay sang this funny song, and I sang. And anyway, it was a wonderful party. But I realized a few years ago I was kind of getting tired of all this taxing landscaping work. So I kept telling Joan, I'd like to move to the Selwood neighborhood. So she didn't really want to, but she finally agreed, and we live in a condo now, just a couple of 100 feet from the Selwood Bridge. And if I can take 1 more minute, I want to just say something about what I'm focused on and interested in now. One is health, nutrition and health. Dave Pedworth gave he did a reading earlier. He and I, years ago, gave a talk about plant-based food and how it's great for your health. Well, Dave didn't stick to it for a long time. I have mostly stuck to it. I can talk about that at length, but obviously not the thing to do. And classical music, I love it. And Jules and I have this in common. I'm also a worshiper of Mozart and Brahms and Beethoven especially. I always tell people, Beethoven is my God. Beethoven ist mein Gott. Deutsch. And one other focus I'm on, which is not exactly cheerful, I am very disturbed and disgusted by the gun violence going on in our country. been so many episodes of mass killings in schools, killing kids. And there are several organizations I donate a little money to. The Sandy Hook Promise, named after the town in Connecticut where 20-some kids were killed. And Giffords, this congresswoman in Arizona was shot on the head, survived, and has started her own movement to push Congress to do something for gun control. And there's a couple other organizations. I'm just horrified by it. And I hope that Congress will finally ban, the first thing they should do is ban any military style weapons like the AK-47, which is designed to do one thing efficiently, kill people. So why the hell allow those guns? Okay, I will stop there.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Dave, we don't have time because we've got to make a few announcements, so I don't have time for questions, but we've so enjoyed hearing your
Well, there would
stories.
be many questions.
No,
Come on.
I don't. Let me see if there's a no, but thank you.
Okay.
You know, to hear, you know, we see each other, share a cup of coffee, sit together at the meetings, but to hear the intricate stories, spending years in Vietnam, raising children that are successful and doing well and figuring out how to get to college, or, you know, I love these programs. And I just want to thank our speakers, Margie and Jules and Dave, for their willingness to share and prepare their stories. So thank you. And Suzanne, thanks for organizing this. Much, much appreciated.